Now let's talk about the next Finance Act of next year. And the proposals are contained in the Finance Bill 2024. One of them is saying Eco-Levy. What is that Eco-Levy? Because people have talked about it. Oh, now mafuta will be more expensive because there's Eco-Levy. Oh, sijui, things will be expensive. Let's hear it from Joyce Gachugi-Waweru. Joyce is the CEO of the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, PAKPRO. Good morning, Joyce.
Good morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you here.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
You'll tell us what PAKPRO is.
Yes.
It's a very nice name.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And I think we've had many conversations about Producer Responsibility Organization and what you guys do, but many people who haven't heard about it. CT is not in.
I know.
He sends his greetings.
Thank God.
He's heard you.
Good.
CT umesikia? Okay. But he left me the proverb.
Wow.
The proverbs for this week are from Zimbabwe.
Wow.
The Republic of Zimbabwe. The president of Zimbabwe is called Emerson Mnangagwa, a.k.a.
The crocodile.
Bas. The proverb for today: if you're going to live by the river, make friends with the crocodile.
If you're going to live in Zimbabwe, okay.
If you're going to live by the river,
Zambezi.
make friends with the crocodile.
Yes.
I think to me, and it's unfortunate I have to relate it to the government, but if we are going to live in this country, we need to be friends with the government. Really, you never know the enemy within. You might need them at any point. Could be a friend when needed. You need to know how to survive with each other in an ecosystem that both of you are in. Yeah.
Okay. What's PAKPRO, the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization?
PAKPRO, the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, is an organization that's a business member organization, similar to others that we have like KEPSA, Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We represent manufacturers, brand owners, retailers, entities that are putting any product into the market, either through import or locally produced. That means we have, of course, within our fold multinational companies, our local super brands, small and medium enterprises. And ideally, our mandate is to ensure that their packaging material, once you and I as consumers have interacted with the product, we then pick it up to treat it, either through recycling or whatever other means is prescribed by NEMA.
Okay.
NEMA is the National Environmental Authority, Management Authority, yes.
So what is plastic?
So what is plastic?
In this particular case, okay, packaging.
Packaging. So plastic is a packaging material, but not singularly just for packaging. Plastic has many applications. I think the easiest for a lot of people to relate to is during COVID. All the masks we were wearing are really made out of plastic. And there are very many variants of plastic. Plastic is derived from the refinery process of crude oil. And it's actually one of the biggest businesses that crude oil refinery companies have. So today in Kenya, of course, we are not an oil-producing country, which means we are importing that resin. And resin, it looks like rice when it's brought into the country of different types, and then it's then used to make different packaging materials or different applications. Yes.
So in terms of packaging, for example, now your members, you've talked about the manufacturers, you've talked about brand owners, retailers. You're dealing with a wide array of people who are actually dealing with packaging.
Absolutely. Because I have within my membership, it's not just plastic. I have glass, I have paper, I have aluminium metal cans, as well as steel or tin, and the different other variants of course, plastic packaging that there are in the market.
Kenya is very big on matters of, environmental conservation.
Absolutely.
We have a National Environment Management Authority. We've been having this conversation, government and industry, on how to make sure that we are, doing the full recycling or just taking the circular economy, and making sure that we are taking care of our economy. The government also comes in and says, you know what, we are going big on this, and to discourage, or whatever reason, use of plastics. First of all, let's ban some certain grades of plastics. Make sure that these ones are harmful to the economy, to the ecology, and we remove them. Then we come up with a new levy. And I do not know. I'm assuming the reason for this is because we are big on the ecology, and that's why we come up with a levy called the Eco-Levy. But now, Joyce, it's a time for you now to take us to class. We have heard many people talking about the Eco-Levy. What is the Eco-Levy, and what's the proposal in the finance bill?
So ideally, one, we have to give credit to this particular regime, because I think it's the first time we've seen our government actually trying to cost environmental impact in their budgets or in their financial planning. So credit to them for doing that. I think Eco-Levy, if I were to define it simply, is really a tax that is imposed to try and mitigate the negative impacts of a product or an activity on the environment. In typical cases, as we've had in other countries, it has been introduced primarily on emissions from vehicles, so that then you have reduced emissions or to allow people to now invest in e-mobility. In our case now, they are proposing Eco-Levy on plastic packaging, Eco-Levy on diapers, Eco-Levy on e-waste or batteries and other such like electronic goods. And I think for us, the pricing and the lack of an actual framework on how to administrate this tax is a challenge. And then secondly, we already have an existing framework that is already at play with government to try and mitigate the pollution that is emanating from all those aspects that I've mentioned, both plastic packaging, electronic waste, as well as the diapers.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is the issue?
So
because if I can just a little bit, the materials that you've mentioned, if I think about them vis-a-vis the economy, when we look at, for example, garbage that is strewn, those three items that you've mentioned always find their way. Garbage that is thrown by the wayside, finding their way out of garbage bins. They're always there. So on one side, one would say there's a case to be made for raising the taxes on those because they're harmful to the environment. What would be the issue on the other side?
So that's actually very valid. And if I were to take you back to 2017 when government banned the plastic bags, it was because there's a recognition and appreciation that there's a problem. After that, of course, the next thing they wanted to do was ban the plastic bottles, the PET bottles that you use for your drinking water, your soda. And at the time, private sector said, give us a chance to demonstrate what is happening in other jurisdictions where we pay into a fund, we raise money that can be used to collect and recycle this packaging. Okay? As you rightly put it, today, if you look at your waste in your bags, you have a lot of plastic, you have electronic waste that is in the dump sites. That is a hazard. So everyone, both sides, private sector and the government, we appreciate there's a problem. The challenge we have is that in 2022, the government enacted a law which makes it mandatory for every company that is putting product into this country, either importing it or manufacturing it locally, to pay some money into a fund or an organization such as ours or others to be able to manage that waste. So this is already at play. Okay, which in effect means if the Eco-Levy was to come into play, it would be like double taxation. Because on one side, it's already mandatory, it's already been happening. And then on this other side, now the government wants to introduce an Eco-Levy. Notwithstanding the cost and the pricing that they've put on the plastic packaging at 150 shillings per kilo is very, very high. Yes.
Okay. What would you say is being sought after here? An alternative to make sure that the environment is safer, or really looking at a chance to then be able to collect more from the industry practitioners?
To be frank, it appears the latter is really what is at play. So if I were to put myself in government's shoes, it would be that they likely feel that maybe the collection is not moving fast enough, number one, of packaging material and e-waste. Number two, they are also looking at how waste is actually being managed in our country. So waste is a devolved function. Okay, which means today Nairobi County has its own system, and as do other 47 counties. The challenge is that waste, you'll find in budgets for the counties, is not a highly prioritized item, which means, in effect, you have a lot of waste that is going uncollected. A lot of county governments did not have dump sites or landfills, so you'll find a lot of waste is strewn in the natural environment and the rivers, which means, in effect, NEMA, where they're sitting, they are identifying that there's a crisis. The crisis needs money. Okay?
Yep.
And from their projections, they're looking at raising about 50 billion shillings per year through this Eco-Levy.
To do what?
To be able to, as they say, to build infrastructure, to be able to manage this waste. Okay? The challenge we have, there's no administration, if you
Framework.
read that, in that framework. And so our fear is this is going to go the direction of the housing levy, where after some time, we're going to be told the money is elsewhere, not being directed into...
It's buying bonds.
Yes, it's because it's not, there's no mechanism to ring fence these funds for whatever it's being used for, number one. And secondly, the rates that have been applied are punitive, which actually means they will not even be able to raise the targets that they are looking to raise.
Joyce, you said the 2022 law. What's that law?
So the law is the Sustainable Waste Management Act.
Okay.
And under Section 13 is where it mandates all companies or producers, importers, to be able to pay the fee that I mentioned.
Okay. Does it say to whom you should pay the fee?
No. So
what does the law say?
Exactly. So it's just a sentence. It actually says every producer is mandated to undertake extended producer responsibility for their products that they introduce into the market or into Kenya, either through importation or through manufacturing. And we as private sector have actually been asking government, give us a regulation. Give us a regulation so that we are able to crystallize that one sentence into what are the different roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
Mark you, we actually are telling government there are so many investment opportunities that you can unlock with this that is devoid of going directly into taxation.
Right.
Because one, county governments will be able to offer an investment portfolio to potential investors on infrastructure. If you look at what Governor Sakaja is doing in Nairobi, he wants to do a waste-to-energy facility. If indeed there was a framework that the regulation was to prescribe, it would be easy for an investor to be able to clearly see what is the value proposition for me to bring money into the country to do, infrastructure development for waste management. But it doesn't exist.
Okay.
It doesn't exist.
So the law says that you shall pay some money into some fund to deal with the issue of environmental waste management. But it has not said how much. It has not said to whom you're paying this money. So what did the private sector do?
So the private sector said, we will work with NEMA collaboratively. You will guide us on how to go about this. Devoid of the regulation.
Right.
Today we have over 1,200 companies that have actually joined these organizations across the sectors. So we have all packaging materials like what we handle. We have the e-waste. We have the hazardous waste, the agrochemicals. And then, of course, under the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, who we have been working with, we have been able to craft a framework that is without regulation on how we can approach this. So ideally what we do is all our members, they pay money into our organizations. And this is based again per kilogram of material that they are putting into the market.
Okay.
We take that money and we then contract our recyclers, who then pass that money through to our waste collectors. Today, as an organization, for instance, we've collected nearly 2 billion plastic bottles. This is your water bottles, soda bottles. We've distributed nearly 270 million shillings to these waste pickers. This is direct income. So whenever we're talking about bottom-up economy,
you're the ones who are actually employing.
We are the ones doing it.
So the guys that we see carrying those sacks, they have actually been formally employed through PAKPRO to collect this.
Exactly.
And it's the industry that has said, we are going to be putting money into PAKPRO so that PAKPRO can then manage this process for us.
Correct.
How much are they putting? How much do you levy, or how much do they contribute?
So our highest levy, because it depends on the type of material, but the highest that we are charging is about 17 shillings per kilo.
17
shillings per kilo.
Per kilo.
If you compare it to what the government is suggesting for plastic, is 150 shillings per kilogram.
Okay.
So you can look at already, you're telling manufacturers, we are deeming and rendering your products non-competitive, and that you need to downsize or look for another packaging material.
Was there impact on the cost of products when producers started contributing the 17 bob?
So ideally for most of them, they have been absorbing this cost. They haven't really pushed it to the consumers, largely because of, I would say it's not as high, but eventually they will. Okay, because of course they are being hit. This is largely the fast-moving consumer goods. They have other taxes that are being imposed on their products. So of course, eventually it will be pushed to the consumer, but not at the level of 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is 17 bob enough? 17 bob per kilo. Is it enough to run the operations and make sure that we are collecting the packaging, we are taking it to sorting centers, we are taking it to recycling centers, we are doing the entire 360. Is 17 bob enough?
Good. So ideally, and this is the beauty with the Sustainable Waste Management Act, it had actually delineated the responsibilities of different people. So from where we sit, the 17 shillings for the role that we are supposed to undertake, which is to collect, recycle. Remember, our recyclers is a business. So they already have a fee that they're paying. We are just coming in with additive, a subsidy really, to be able to support the incremental volumes for that we want them to mop out of the environment. But the county governments, they have a role. Their role is to establish infrastructure, be it the collection points, be it where the waste, the trucks, etc. And that 17 shillings doesn't feed into that. Okay. This is a different cost for them. Yes.
Those are the two roles.
Yes.
Industry and county government at that level.
Correct.
How much do you think the counties would need for their role?
Yeah, to be frank, it depends on your size. But if we were to look at most urban counties, which are really the high growth centers where a lot of waste is being produced, I would definitely say in a year, they would need at least 20 to 30 billion shillings a year for waste to be managed properly.
Per county?
Per high urban county. For the smaller counties, they can much less. So 5 billion, a billion to 5 billion a year for the smaller ones.
And the NEMA 50 billion, is it the one that's going to county, or is it just for NEMA now for regulation?
Supposedly it's supposed to go into the counties.
Okay. To what level is all of this happening right now? If we say 1 to 10, 10 being maximum, 1 being non-existent, where is this happening at this level?
Nothing. None of
Even
the counties. So even Nairobi County doesn't have that kind of budget for their management of the waste.
Is there a budget for management of waste at any level right now?
So there is, but it's largely around collection and disposal.
Okay.
Purely collection and disposal. Very linear.
Okay. So linear. So in terms of... recycling does not happen at any level. Management of this waste is not happening at any level. It's from point A to point B. All right.
Take it to Dandora.
Yes.
That's it.
And that's it. Okay.
And that's why for us, we came up with the idea of being able to now recover and now take it into recycling.
Okay, I know you want to go to a break. For purposes of clarity, what we're saying now with this new Eco-Levy, what is being proposed essentially is that this non-existent management, for example, of waste, wants to be upgraded to whereby it's being managed. And what is being asked of manufacturers and those in the industry is pay a little bit more per kilo so that we can actually then get into a cyclical management of this same product.
So ideally, it's not a little bit more, it's significantly more. but also without guarantees.
That it will actually happen.
Yes, that it will happen, and we are already trying to deploy circular economy on our own.
Okay.
Yes.
So in principle, you're not against the setting up of a fund to help with the management of plastic and waste, right? And e-waste and the other hazardous waste. In principle, you're not.
Yes, because it's already happening.
It's already happening. What you're against, number one, is the way it's being introduced in the Finance Bill 2024. Number one, just call it a levy with no framework of what this levy is and how it shall be managed. And number two, the rate. Yes. And you're saying this is too high, it's going to have an impact on the market.
And number three, the duplication of efforts between what is existing and what they are proposing.
Okay.
Yes.
That they hawajaongelesha. I mean, mnakuja tu ni kama tutakuwa tukifanya kitu yoyote.
Absolutely.
Put on the light.
And we've been here in the room together.
Joyce Gachugi-Waweru is the CEO of the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization. PAKPRO is our guest. Finance Bill 2024. And now it's coming out from various sectors and sector players. The PAKPRO have an issue with the finance bill on two issues. One is the introduction of the Eco-Levy, and two is removal of certain VAT exemptions in manufacturing and construction sector, and how that is going to impact the producers of plastic. But we'll get into the VAT one. Let's first of all exhaust and understand the Eco-Levy. There's a law in place, and this was concerted effort by industry and government coming together. Let's actually have a law. And the law is the Sustainable Waste Management Act, came into effect in 2022. It's in effect. It even talked about, okay, so you shall be contributing some money towards a fund for, helping with the waste management. But it did not get into the regulations that define what this fee is going to be like, how it's going to be managed. The industry waits for the regulations, sees government is pussyfooting on this. Industry takes the step and says, members of producer responsibility organization, let's come together and let's start this thing. So you've already started this thing. Government has now come and said, okay, by the way, you can introduce an Eco-Levy. And with this Eco-Levy, now we can use this money to, manage, wastes in our environment, which is a big thing. And we all agree it's a big thing. The problem that you have is threefold, that as you've said. Number one, there's no framework on how this levy is to be, first of all, ring-fenced, second, managed, and third, disbursed. Second, it's too high. And third, there's no reference to the industry and the lead that the industry has taken in this. So in terms of just the framework, it's a levy. We have, it's not the first levy. Watch out the housing levy first. Let's talk about the others. We have railway development levy. We have fuel levy. You have road maintenance levy, right? You have the petroleum development levy.
Correct.
Each of them is governed by its own regulation in the law.
Correct.
That says, for example, the road maintenance levy, this money is ring-fenced. It shall go to the road agencies for maintenance of roads countrywide. Railway development levy shall go to the Kenya Railway for development of rail and management of rail. Petroleum development levy shall go to the National Treasury, shall be used to cushion against fluctuations in prices. And that's the purpose of this levy. Then we have the housing levy. They did it, then they went to court and I told, boss, you have to say, what is this levy? Now there's a law, housing development levy. The housing levy, money shall be collected, shall stay in this kitty, it shall be used for development of houses in this format. Are you saying there's nothing like that talks about the Eco-Levy?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay, so what is there now? It's just the proposal in the law?
Yes, it's just a sentence. And, unfortunately, introduced, I would say, without consultation. Granted, in government's tax policy, they say that they will introduce, taxes and levies as they keep going. But this actually is counterintuitive to their position, because in the tax policy that they have, they've actually stated very clearly that these levies will be introduced under a framework. They will be predictable, and we can be able, you understand.
There's going to be clear visibility into what this levy is. Right.
And so for us, where we are seated, we are looking at even plastic on its own is a product that is used across board. Okay. Our economy today is really a Kadogo economy. The divisibility of our products into smaller fractions is actually reliant on plastic. And so without plastic, the Kadogo economy, I hazard to say, it doesn't exist. And so when we're looking at how these costs are actually going to trickle down to Mwananchi, it's going to be significant. We're talking about 100 to 170% increase. I was joking with someone, I think even yesterday, that the price of salt is going to go up.
Oh, because salt, but that's plastic.
You don't carry it in your hand.
No, the price of salt is going to go up. And so is your bread, your milk, your sanitary towels and diapers. Everything will go up.
Because we're talking about here essentially that it is an end user responsibility.
Correct.
That's what happens as a result of this.
Correct.
That literally anything today, because of, and maybe we can ground it, that anything today that you purchase or that you use that comes in any kind of packaging as a result of this new eco tax, we're going to call it an eco tax, Eco-Levy, is going to increase in cost, and the person who buys it is the one who is going to bear the brunt.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, our government has also segmented it to only plastic packaging. So if you're using paper, glass, and of course it's because they see them as more environmentally friendly, which we accept, but to completely put a blanket plastic packaging material at 150 shillings per kilo, we find it very punitive. Very punitive.
I know we touched on this a little bit at the very beginning, but I want to go a little bit deeper. That why do you think that it is those who then are in the business of plastic packaging that then are coming under this new levy? Why?
Largely it's because plastic is definitely a pollutant. It is the most ubiquitous material you find in the natural environment. So you find it in your rivers, you find it in, the streets, and largely because it's also the most predominantly used. Unfortunately, the problem we have in Kenya is really a disposal problem. We have a consumer behavior issue, and those are the things that need to be addressed. The Eco-Levy will not address them.
Okay, so that was my next question, because here we are saying that what would make sense when you do a 1+1 is that, all right, if it is a pollutant, it's ubiquitous, etc., when we introduce a levy, the thinking in your head is that, well, the proceeds from this levy would then go towards managing this problem that has been faced, because you bring about a levy because there's an issue. That this levy then would be seen to sort out this issue. But we, for all intents and purposes, we don't see any kind of movement towards having this, circular management when it then comes to the disposal of plastic. So it sounds as though you're saying that even before it has begun, that it is dead in the water.
Absolutely. I wouldn't put it any better. It's actually dead in the water because, remember I've said we already have a parallel process that we have been working collaboratively with government, both NEMA and the Ministry of Environment. And ideally for us, we have been trying to develop a circular economy, which means we're looking at end-to-end. Where we're producing, are our manufacturers putting material that can be recycled into the market? This is part of what we do. Today you've seen different packaging material changing color, Some have gone from darker colors to clear. It's really to enhance the recyclability of this packaging material. You've seen packaging material in the market. Some used to have stripping at the top of your bottle top. That piece of plastic has been removed, which means there's an effort by manufacturers to reduce the amount of plastic they are putting into the market. But this is being done under that extended producer responsibility framework. With the Eco-Levy, because there is no framework, this money is just tax it, put it is the Kenya Revenue Authority collecting it.
Yeah.
And then we know where that money goes into the consolidated fund.
And from there, it mixes with any shilling that comes in.
That is coming in.
It's a shilling.
Exactly. It doesn't come green.
Shilling plastic.
Exactly. So you can't tell. There's no difference. But at the back end, Mwananchi is feeling the pinch because the cost of goods is going to go up significantly. I can tell you your 5-liter mtungi of cooking oil, add 150 shillings to it straight.
What?
Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Because we're talking about 100% absorption by the end user.
Absolutely.
If you're going to charge the person who is packaging oil, like you're saying, you're going to charge them 150 shillings. Well, I'm going to say, okay, fine, I'll spend 150 shillings, but you'll buy it for 150 shillings more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Remember, if you look at the finance bill holistically, the same goods that are going to be applied, have the Eco-Levy on their products, they're also being taxed elsewhere because these are fast-moving consumer goods. We don't fault the government for looking at this as a revenue source. We are faulting them for how the taxes are being applied unpredictably and exorbitantly to the point where our products will cease to be competitive. Remember, Tanzania, Uganda, and other countries in the East African community are not applying this Eco-Levy. Okay, yet we want to export our goods to them. So already you've rendered our products uncompetitive.
They're going to be guaranteed more expensive.
And the worst part of it, those products from the East African community will come into the country and they're cheaper.
Okay.
So you're killing local manufacturing.
How would it be done better? Because I think that's what public participation is all about. It's got to be end to end.
Correct.
Right? And now the practitioners in the industry, we can complain and say, well, this is ridiculous, but then what's the option?
So the option for us is what we are telling government: give us the regulation for the extended producer responsibility. We're giving them a canvas to say, this is what we expect you to do. These are the fees we expect you to pay, and for us to be able to engage around what those fees look like. Where are we spending this money? Are we putting it into supporting county governments? Are we supporting the waste collection system, public awareness, consumer behavior change? And that's why we are insisting, give us the extended producer responsibility regulation, because this allows both parties to sit at the table and agree on what needs to be paid and where it needs to be spent. Okay, but more importantly, it's an existing framework, because what we have with the Eco-Levy is very arbitrary.
So it's all over the place.
It's all over the place.
Joyce, what if under the Sustainable Waste Management Act, the extended producer responsibility regulations created an Eco-Levy fund? Would that be okay?
So it would be okay to the
and
level.
then now it says that this is what the fund is, how the fund shall be managed. This is the role of the private sector, the public sector, and the county governments in this, and this is how much money goes to the various in entities that have a responsibility here. Would that be okay?
It would be okay to the point at which the private sector, the manufacturers, the stakeholders are allowed to give their input on what that would look like.
Okay.
But ideally, it makes more sense.
Okay.
If it was done that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if the amount was close to the 17 bob that's there right now, would it be okay?
Makes more sense, yes. Because you see, remember, whenever we are looking at managing environmental costs, we need to also look at how do businesses survive. This has to be a win-win. That's why it's called sustainable development. It's not that you kill one and then the other to the expediency of another. It's that everything survives.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the finance committee listens to you and they're like, okay, lakini hatujaelewa hii mambo, so they retain it, this proposal as it's contained in the finance bill, and it becomes Finance Act, what will you do?
Disaster.
Oh, wow.
It's a disaster. I'll tell you why. You know, let's look at the trip the president made the other day to the US. Some of the things that were signed, some of the agreements that were entered into, you'll find one of them was an investment in plastic recycling. Okay? And I won't even talk about the electronic investments. Let's just talk about the plastic recycling. You have a facility that is opening shop in Kenya. It will be the first of its kind in Eastern Central Africa, manufacturing converting PET plastic bottles for your soda and water to make resin, to make new bottles.
Wow.
Okay? This is happening in South Africa. It's happening in Egypt. So for us, the potential of creating a recycling hub in Kenya for the Eastern Central African market is a real thing. We started by developing a standard with the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and here we are now. And to the point where the US companies, American companies, are seeing this as a potential investment area.
Right.
Now, you have a situation like that, and then on the back end, local, back home, the government is saying we need to reduce the cost of farm inputs, your agriculture, your pesticides. What is the packaging material for these things? Plastic. Okay? All these are going to drive costs up significantly. So when you begin to tax at that production level, at the level we are seeing, it becomes counterintuitive to actually realizing not just economic goals, but even goals around increasing agricultural outputs, being able to compete in the regional market. We have this whole Africa Continental Trade Agreement.
Right.
Again, we are out. So we are like kicking ourselves, beating ourselves down before we ever had a chance to stand up. Yeah.
Okay. The other issue is on the removal of exemptions on VAT. Please explain that.
Yeah, this is a big issue because, as I said, and rightly so, I've given you an example of some of the agreements that were signed in the US. So you have plastic recycling. Okay. You would expect that government is proposing an Eco-Levy on one hand, that they would say, because we want Eco-Levy to raise money for recycling and other activities, that we would leave exemptions on the machinery.
Yep.
But they've actually gone ahead to say, we're going to impose Eco-Levy and we're going to remove the exemptions on the machinery. So
what does that mean? Abu, explain.
So today, if I want to recycle plastics, I bring in the machinery from other countries, for instance, to set up the facilities here. Okay, especially high value recycling. We're talking about investments of $20 million upwards.
Okay.
You bring in the machinery, you set shop, you're going to be charged VAT on that machinery. Before it was exempt, rightly so that you can be able to allow more investment into recycling. Okay. Now with the VAT in place, you find that it's going to increase the costs of the plastic machinery
by 16%.
Yes, excluding the other costs.
Everything else.
Yes, we had corporate tax at some point that had been reduced. That was put back. Income tax.
Is this removal of exemption only going to this sector?
No. So it's covering a wide range of sectors, but we have seen some sectors, for instance, the tea manufacturing sector, they have gotten some reduced rates. And so that's what we are seeing. Where the government is interested in spurring growth, we are seeing them actually doing the right thing to spur the growth. And that's why we are seeing like they are not looking at the recycling sector as a revenue sector for them. And I think that's the genesis of the problem.
Where it could be a significant revenue generator for government when you look at recycling, because everything across board, because we do have jurisdictions whereby recycling is for everything, from water to waste to plastics to paper, everything. What would it take for is it a choice not to see it as a revenue generator, or is it that there are other things that are taking up the space that could be used towards that? What would the issue be here? or turning a blind eye to? 'Cause
it looks more like turning a blind eye because, you see, the recycling sector, specifically for plastics, is actually targeted in Africa alone to be a $72.6 billion sector by 2030. 72.6 billion. Remember, the waste management sector is one of the largest. Right now, as I'm seated here, likely 10 people have joined the waste collection system while I'm seated here, because it's the easiest sector to quickly monetize. I can just walk into a dump site or your trash can, pick a few containers and go and sell them and make money. So in terms of informal job creation, the potential is also enormous. But more importantly, it also has one of the most significant growth potentials of tax base formalization. Because now with the e-teams that you were talking about earlier, waste collection companies are actually required to have this.
Right.
Okay. And so in terms of formalization, we are seeing so many companies now formalizing their businesses so that they can be able to get the benefits around the revenues we are putting into the system. Because we cannot pay money to anyone who is not compliant.
Right.
So in order for them to receive that benefit, we have seen them going to register and formalize their entities. And so for us, we feel the government has, I would say it's more of turning a blind eye and not prioritized it, despite having a very good green growth economy strategy.
Have you engaged with the people at the National Treasury? I know that you work very closely with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Anthony from CAM was here and he says they have meetings with Treasury. So has PAKPRO and the other producer responsibility organizations had actually a sit down with Treasury people, not NEMA, not Environment Ministry, Treasury people?
So we have, and it's usually part of a task force we have that was actually started in the last regime. At the time, we were, of course, singularly working on the PET plastic bottles. But, of course, now as we have been developing, other regulation and policies, we have been working together. But there's definitely a need to have a higher level of engagement. And I think that's our biggest take out of even this new finance bill, that there's a need to engage.
But there are guys somewhere who don't know this.
They are actually highly unfamiliar with what is happening on the ground.
How would we explain this? I mean, because every time we talk about these things, we're like, there are some guys at the National Treasury, all right? They're always touted, very well exposed economists who understand their stuff. I mean, they've worked, and they do all these things, and then you look at what's coming out of them, and you're like,
I know.
What on earth? So then one is forced to ask,
yes, what happened?
Is it them? Or is it somebody else?
Who is pushing them to operate in that manner? Because one would expect that if you had forward-leaning, technocrats whose job is to look at the wheels of development and say, okay, we're going to churn them in this direction. But then coming up with something like this, which for all intents and purposes seems to be retrogressive at best, why would a forward-thinking technocrat that sits at Treasury then make a decision like this, whereby, if anything, it throttles development, it throttles, a progressive economy? So then why would we have that kind of action? It takes us back instead of taking us forward. And this is not just whinging or whining. It is the case.
It's what's happening.
This is what's happening. Why? How do we operate in this arena when these things are coming forward? How do you say? And if we said that one of the benchmarks of development is that manufacturing and the processes surrounding it has to be front and center of any economy.
Absolutely.
How do we do that with things like this?
And that's actually the question for us, because I think for us, one, the Eco-Levy proposal and even the removal of the VAT exemptions on the plastic recycling machinery came as a shock. I do have to say that. The current principal secretary at Treasury was actually a principal secretary at the Ministry of Environment at one time, and really in the thick of things. So this is he's really And I say
he's been there.
He's been there.
In
He's
those
very
conversations.
knowledgeable, very skilled at what he does. So he's very familiar with what is happening at the Ministry of Environment, especially around mitigating plastic pollution. But I think from the submissions that were done this week before the Parliamentary Committee on Finance and National Planning by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, it came out that, of course, NEMA really was one of the drivers of this Eco-Levy. And I think for us, our greatest concern was we've been doing this work
We've
together.
been working together.
And then boom, we have this thing,
Kikulacho.
and it has come as a shock because the
Kikulacho.
reality is, in terms of an impact, there was no regulatory impact analysis or assessment done. We'd have been able to guide them and tell them,
Right.
in terms of costing, this thing is going to move in this way. It's very easy to look at numbers and say, oh, we're going to raise 50 billion shillings.
Yeah.
But that's very linear, because the reality is you assume consumption is going to be static, that you're going to increase these costs and people will continue to consume as they are, or that manufacturers will continue to produce as they are, which isn't the case.
All the best, Joyce. All the best.
To us.
To us, we are all,
Salt in your hand.
yes, salt and everything else. Toothpaste, milk, bread.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.